Hello, dear friends. In this session, we're going to revisit the concept of actions, which we've already encountered in previous lessons. Let me remind you that you can work with actions and find ready-made actions in the marketplace. The marketplace is completely free, and even though it's called a marketplace, you don't have to pay to use an action. You just find the action you need and use it. Basically, actions are developed by GitHub, so if you see that an action is marked as being from a user, it means that these actions were created directly by the GitHub team. But there are also companies that develop action games, and even single developers who also develop action games. And we will be developing our own actions in future lessons. Actions can be local in the repository folder, or they can even be hosted on the marketplace so that other developers can use them. Actions simplify workflows by reducing manual command writing. When writing a workflow, we specify commands. Actions help perform tasks with fewer lines using pre-made actions. We copied files from the repository. So actions allow us to shorten that process and perform specific tasks with just a few lines by using a ready-made action instead of having to think through all the logic and build it using commands. A great example of using an action is this line, where we copied files from the repository to the working machine with just one line of code. Remember, we solved the same task using commands. So using commands, it doesn't get solved that easily in just one line. Therefore, the main goal of actions is to reduce the time spent writing code. Moreover, the first action we create, we will shorten this code even more. So, let's say we have these repeating commands here. That's literally 10 extra lines of commands, but in a real workflow, there could be even more, and they might repeat across different jobs. To avoid writing and duplicating this code, we can take all these steps and turn them into our own personal action, which we can then call with just one line of code. If we need to pass parameters, we can do that with a few more lines to send parameters to our personal action, and we'll encounter that a bit later. Now, when writing an action, you might have noticed the connection here. The action ID, just like the repository ID, consists of the author's name and the ID of the directory itself. But when we call it, we also specify the version after the 8 symbol. Why is this done? Because if you call the action this way, it will refer directly to the code. When we create a workflow in a repository by an author, if we're talking about a third-party action, there might be a specific version that works for us. But after a few months, the author might change something. And with this approach, we'll always load the latest commit from the author. And there's a high chance that our code will stop working. So we either refer to a commit, and we'll always load the version that was committed with that specific ID, or if it's a commercial action, the authors create a version in the repository. If a version is specified, it will be in lowercase. If a version is specified, then in the 4th version, there won't be any major changes that could affect functionality. Even if there are some changes, they will be in the 5th version. But it will work. The 4th one will work. And you can also refer to a branch, like the main branch, for example. The recommended option is, of course, to refer to the version next. Every action has documentation. You can check out the action, like in the marketplace, for example. Let's open checkout. The documentation is available here, but if you're not really comfortable reading it here, this same documentation is also duplicated on the repository page. You can go to the repository page and read it there. You can definitely go like this. And if you find it more pleasant to read here, because I personally find it more enjoyable here, the color scheme contrasts better, and we can see what parameters this action can take from us to perform certain tasks. And a logical question that might come up is, why write your own custom actions if there are so many actions in the marketplace? In fact, such tasks often come up because you need to solve some personal issues. And usually in practice, you'll find the need to write your own actions. So let's figure out what types of actions exist in GitHub Actions. They are divided into 3 categories. Let's call the first ones composite actions. They are made up of various commands and steps like these. These are the simplest actions. meaning if we have large chunks of steps that repeat in the code, we can separate them into a standalone action and just call it in this workflow or any other workflow. This makes writing easier. These are the easiest actions to write. You don't need to know programming in JavaScript or how to write Docker files. We just take and move the commands. And in our custom action, we can also use third-party actions. We just take and move the commands. And in our custom action, we can also use third-party actions. So, roughly speaking, we can copy this into a separate action. There are also JavaScript actions. This is another type of actions. So, to write them, you need a good understanding of JavaScript. Basically, it will be just like any other repository where we can connect any scripts, any packages, and write JavaScript code that will be executed. It will run under the Node.js infrastructure, and any package that exists will be available. And the third type that exists is Docker actions. In this case, you can write them in any language that you're comfortable with. So, a Docker container is created with the necessary infrastructure, and the code is written under this infrastructure that returns something that's needed. And this way, you can use it under the Docker infrastructure. So, those are the three types of actions. These are composite, Docker, and JavaScript. Composite comes from the English word composite. So, it means that we combine these kinds of commands and steps together